Hey, what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and it is July 25th, and I have finally updated a lot of ands in there. I have finally updated the Warlock Feedback document that so many of you guys have been asking me to update over the course of the last month or so. The last real relevant update that we put out was, I believe, June 20th or so, and I've been meaning to get around to it for a while, but a handful of things have sort of held me up, pushed it back, but here we are. We've made a lot of changes to it. Alpha has also transitioned to beta at this point, so some problems or some things have been addressed directly, like we gave feedback on before, like the internal combustion change from 7 seconds back to 5 seconds, which is great. So we're going to be talking about changes. Most of these changes are new, so we're going to be talking about these today. Just certain things that have, I guess, become issues or things that have transpired over the course of beta, and things that I feel could be changing or could change as a whole to make Affliction, Destro, and Demo feel a little bit better here. Now, like I mentioned, once again, Alpha is beta now. Add-ons, weak auras, those things are working. So if you want any of the weak auras, profiles, add-ons you see here, I'll place a link to my Twitch down below where you can grab them. Feel free to swing by, grab them, and ask any questions you might have. So let's get right into this. So starting off, this is the general feedback talk. I will have a link to this in the video description as well. If you'd like to look at this, I will also have it pinned on my Twitter and things like that. So now this change here, for the most part, is the same as it was before. It highlights pet summons being a thing. 6-second pet summoning is not where we want to be. Recently, I had my pet die in raid testing. My Felgar died on Dark Lady Ny'alotha, I think. I forgot the name of the boss, but it died. I fell domination to back out, and it died again. I had to resummon it for 6 seconds, and instead, I just died. So it's rough. The change still needs to be, I feel, personally reverted. If it is indeed a PvP change, then make it active, make it 6 seconds in PvP or war mode. Besides that, it needs, I feel personally, needs to go back to what it is currently on live. It's too restrictive and doesn't really have any upsides. So now there's been a lot of, I guess, talk about curses being a thing and being applicable to raid bosses. Now, personally, I'm going to be real here. I don't really see a huge issue with having to apply a curse every 2 minutes with it being instant cast and taking 1 GCD. However, I know that people are sort of frustrated with that, and they're comparing it to Demon Hunter's Chaos Brand and Monk's Mystical Touch, giving the 5% physical and magical damage bonuses to targets they hit. So there are a few sides to that. We're talking about this paragraph here as well. Number one is that they don't have the option of applying different abilities. It's straight up just a 5% physical damage increase or magical damage increase on that target. We have the option of technically 4 curses, being Recklessness, Weakness, Tongues, and Exhaustion. Now, Wreck and Weakness are the only curses you can apply to bosses, from what we've seen so far. But we do have those options, so that more or less makes the passive branding, I guess, of just an ability sort of out the window. But if people, as far as like potential suggestions, changes go for these curses, making it so they don't take a GCD every 2 minutes, there are 3 things I sort of want to talk about here. One potential change is to remove them from the GCD, which would counteract the damage loss applying the curse or reapplying a curse every 2 minutes. The second change I want to highlight here, and this is going a bit more in depth down the rabbit hole, but this was feedback from stream and things in general. Another option is to make an aura-based system that applies the curse you choose whenever you attack with a spell or ability. So that's more or less getting at something along the line of like pally, auras, things like that. Basically going into your spell book and maybe being able to say, okay, well, you know, similar to pet summons, let's go. I have 4 options here. Let's go. Bam. That is instead Curse of Weakness. So whenever I attack with a spell, it's going to apply Curse of Weakness to my target. Now, there are a few caveats to that. Like number 1, if you have 2 warlocks in the raid, one is the Recklessness warlock and one is the Weakness one, and the Wreck Warlock dies, are you able to change those in combat? Number 1. There's a few like things that need to be hammered out, but that to me seems like a semi-solid alternative. And the third option we have here is talking about additional systems like Death Knight Rune Foraging or Shaman Weapon Enhancements, Rockbiter, Frost Brand, basically applying the actual curse or I guess effect passively whenever you attack the target. Now, like I said, I personally don't have a huge issue with it. Given the option of having it be a GCD or not, I obviously would not. I'd rather it not be a GCD. But in the end, that's sort of the world we live in. I think it's important to try and maybe pick and choose your battles. I think there are more impactful changes that we need, and that instead of having to cast one instant cast spell every 2 minutes. My main concern here, or issue with these 3 changes, though, that we're suggesting here, is that Shadowlands is about returning abilities, in a sense. They wanted to bring back abilities that have been pruned. Curses, wreck, weakness, exhaustion. They are, I guess, iconic abilities, in a sense. And bringing those back in an altered form, being a weapon enhancement or like an aura, sort of defeats that purpose. So I'm on the fence about these changes, but I wanted to give some potential feedback and suggestions about those. So moving on. Number 3, Ritual of Doom was mentioned at BlizzCon to be a returning Warlock ability in Shadowlands. Is that still something that we should be expecting in a later build? Basically, everyone wanted me to ask last time. Ritual of Doom was mentioned to be coming back. It hasn't come back. So what's going on with that? Not really sure. It could be in a later beta build. At this point, I think it's probably scrapped, but we haven't really heard much about it, so I figured it was important to highlight here. So we're actually going to skip over this. It was more or less talking about Dark Fury, Shadow Fury having an instant cast caveat tied to Dark Fury, but the more we talked about it on stream, I sort of felt like it was a bit too strong. It was pretty strong. So we'll come back to that maybe later on. But starting off with Affliction here. So there are a few things we're going to have to show you talent-wise here as well, but so there are a few things that I want to address with Affliction. Number 1, the first talent row has the Nightfall, Inevitable Demise, and Drain Soul talents as potential choices. While we don't know the tuning on them just yet, there's a lot of overlap here when it comes to these talents. You essentially want, let me swap to Aff here, but you essentially want Nightfall in Mythic Plus, or multi-target based scenarios, because it was changed in Shadowlands to actually have a higher proc chance with multiple corruptions rolling, which is different from live right now. Inevitable Demise is awesome to see around. It was buffed recently damage-wise, however it gains a lot of value with multiple agonies rolling. And Drain Soul is in a similar spot as well, because shard sniping is a huge part of our toolkit. I want access to all 3 of these abilities technically in Mythic Plus, however that's not really an option here. So what I'm talking about here is essentially the issue is that with Nightfall being a talent, you simply cannot make Drain Soul our baseline filler, as it replaces Shadow Bolt, thus making Nightfall a dead talent, nor can you move them from sharing the same row. You can, however, safely move Inevitable Demise to another row, thus giving us the option of running both Nightfall and ID, Inevitable Demise, or Drain Soul and Inevitable Demise. This paragraph more or less feeds into this, though. Another potential way of addressing the issue would be to make Drain Soul our baseline filler spell, and in its place, bring back the Malefic Grasp talent from Legion. Now, I know there are 2 sides of the argument here. You either love or you hate Shadow Bolt. For the most part. Personally, I prefer Drain Soul. I don't hate it, but I know, like, people, they'll die on that hill. So this sort of caters to that crowd. However, like, I do feel not even just thematically, Drain Soul does fit Affliction's toolkit better. Having that baseline filler spell being a shard sniper really helps just Aff's flow, rotational fluidity as a whole. So you could leave Nightfall where it is and instead have it transform Drain Soul into Shadow Bolt if selected, basically meaning that Shadow Bolt replaces Drain Soul if you take the Nightfall talent. It's not as hard of a swap as you think it might be, because Drain Soul does basically that. It's just backwards. So this gives you a scaling proc based talent for multi-target settings, Nightfall, multiple corruptions, as well as a single target oriented ability, which would be Malefic Grasp, which fits our toolkit well, helps our single target damage, and also fits the returning abilities part of Shadowlands. So this partially goes into the Malefic Rapture, or Malefic Rapture being our soul shard spender as well, because Rapture is a great AoE-based soul shard spender, and it's also good single target-wise, but there is a bit of overlap and just awkwardness in a sense that it's like our universal shard spender. Now, it scales with multiple targets, but I mean, multiple things scale with multiple targets, so it's okay there regardless, but I think a return of Malefic Grasp in place of Drain Soul, having it go baseline, would, number 1, help improve Affliction's single target toolkit in a sense, because it does feel it's strong on beta right now, but tuning hasn't happened. It feels that it could use a bit of a push in that direction, in a sense. And number 2, it breaks up the overlap of abilities in this row, which I've been debating how to do for a while now, and honestly, I think it might be one of the better alternatives or solutions here. Moving on. We talked about this a bit before, but this is basically referencing the return of Unstable Affliction like we had a month and a half ago or so, where it's limited to one, but limited to one on multiple targets, not just one iteration on on any target. So in its current form, you can have one UA rolling on one target total anywhere. If you're fighting 10,000 targets, you have one Unstable Affliction rolling. About a month ago, it was changed in a build or two to be limited to one per target. So if you're fighting 10 targets, you can have 10 UAs rolling just at one stack on each target. The thing that did was that Unstable Affliction does not cost a soul shard to cast anymore. It also has a 21-second duration at level 60. But it does give you a soul shard if the target dies with UA on it. So it made Unstable Affliction drain soul shard sniping in Malefic Plus relatively skill intensive, but it made the spec have much higher skill ceiling, and it felt a lot more rewarding when you played properly with it. It gave you the decision of, okay, this mob has X health left. Is it worth moving a UA or putting a UA on this for an extra shard? And if it is, how am I going to handle those 2 shards coming in when it dies? One from UA and one from Drain Soul. I need to Rapture once or twice here, and like not overcapping on shards when a pack died, like building more Raptures, casting more Raptures before that happened, was where like the skill ceiling I feel like really increased. The reversion to having one active total I think is a step in the wrong direction. I'd love to see it reverted back to the way it was. So this is referencing Shadow's Embrace, currently Drain Soul. It's basically saying that Drain Soul stacks Shadow's Embrace much faster. They did recently change Haunt to give 1 stack of Shadow's Embrace whenever it hits the target. That's a step in the right direction. However, I feel that also making Shadow Bolt apply 2 stacks would be another step in the right direction. So essentially, if you're playing a Haunt build and you're not playing Drain Soul for whatever reason, you end up applying Haunt and then Shadow Bolt at some point from 1 stack to 3 stacks. It would help close that gap a bit because 3 Shadow Bolts takes a lot longer to cast and also has travel time to stack Shadow's Embrace from 0 to 3 with 1 stack per Shadow Bolt, or even 1 to 3 if Haunt's applied beforehand, versus Drain Soul actually stacking it within, what, 2 seconds? Because Drain Soul stacks Shadow's Embrace with each incremental tick, not one full drain. It's each incremental tick, so it stacks very quickly. This is important to mention here too. The Venthyr Impending Catastrophe ability currently applies Curse of Tongues or Weakness to mobs that it hits, which the explosion hits, essentially. It, however, is not smart cursing. Smart cursing. I made that up myself, so don't look for Blizzard terminology on that. But it essentially, I've seen it quite often it applies tongues to melee-based mobs that don't cast spells. And then quite often you also see it apply weakness to casters. I've quite literally seen it apply Curse of Weakness to a caster mid-greater heal cast. Having this ability smart curse things would be a huge step in the right direction for Venthyr, like Impending Catastrophe, and make it a much more competitive Covenant. It already is in the first place, but this is a huge utility bonus, and honestly, it just sort of feels like that should be the case. I know it's like sort of RNG, and at times it does line up well, but it just feels like that should be the case baseline. It's more or less like, at this current point, it sort of feels like it's just like a broken, not functioning ability. So hopefully that is taken into account. Now, the final thing that I have for Affliction here, and this is a bit of a reach too. If you've read ahead, come back to me. So one of the big differences here in Shadowlands with Affliction is that Malefic Rapture, like we said, is your Soul Shard spender. The only other ability that costs a Soul Shard is Seed of Corruption. However, Rapture, I feel, barring scaling and things, does what Seed of Corruption does if you're looking at the damage side of it, even with the seeds being taken into account, much better. So the Seeds, talent-wise, needs to be reevaluated as a whole with the introduction of Malefic Rapture. They both do very similar things, AoE damage and Mythic Plus, while both costing a Soul Shard. However, taking Sow the Seeds causes you to lose out on Vile Taint, which both grants you a dot on each mob it hits, which fuels Rapture, as well as dealing damage from the Vile Taint itself, and slowing every mob hit. So, selecting Sow the Seeds in this row loses out on a dot application per mob, which gives you bigger Raptures on those mobs, while also dealing damage on its own from the dot iteration it puts on every single mob individually, and slows them. It's pretty impactful, because in a sense, you can just spread your corruption with casting 1 Seed of Corruption in the first place. A potential change could be that Sow the Seeds now also applies Agony as well as Corruption to all targets hit. Now, this has been a pretty big point of contention on stream for a while, because this has been a change that a lot of people have suggested and wanted to see, but I've been a bit hesitant to suggest it because it's pretty big. It's similar to how a Shadow Priest Misery talent works. It applies Vampiric Touch and Shadow Wear Pain. So, but the issue is, damage-wise, it feels subpar because of, number one, Vile Taint, number two, Rapture. It feels like it's an out-of-place talent. But so the Seeds is an iconic ability that Warlocks have had in Mythic Plus for a while. I was trying to think about how this could be changed to be made relevant. So I'll give an example. The first pull in Freehold with Mythic Plus, where a lot of groups pull 3 packs at once, lust it together, kill them all. In that setting, if Sow the Seeds worked the way that I mentioned here, you will be able to essentially cast Sow the Seeds, which would implant 3 seeds, and when it pops, it would apply Corruption and Agony to all those mobs. And then, for the most part, you probably roll a UA on a mob and go into casting your Raptures and going from there. Now, that might seem pretty overpowered in a sense, but thinking about it, you don't have access to Vile Taint here, nor do you have access to Singularity. And Vile Taint applies a dot to all those mobs on top of Corruptions, which you get from Seed of Corruption. But the thing is, on a 12-13 mob pull, you're not going to apply 12-13 agonies. You're probably going to roll a few after casting your seed and then go into your Vile Taint and your UA and your Rapture spam. So having Sow the Seeds apply agony sort of puts you in a spot where, okay, it helps me apply all of my dots initially faster, which leads to more shard generation because multiple agonies, which fuels more Raptures, but they're not going to hit as hard necessarily because of, not having the third or fourth dot application, whatever it may be, from the Vile Taint here. So, and plus also Vile Taint deals damage on its own. So I've been on the fence about this change for a while, but I think personally this would be a step in the right direction for Sow the Seeds. It would keep it relevant. It certainly would, because Vile Taint might end up being our best single target spender ability as well in this row, due to like the baseline damage it deals, the fact that it's an extra dot for Rapture, and once again, it's on a 20-second CD. And technically, Vile Taint does cost a Soul Shard too. So you have Rapture, Vile Taint, and Seed of Corruption. But there you go. So I'm not, like I said, there is one more thing to take into account here too, and that is Mastery. Yes, I'm red. Yes, that is Mastery. Mastery does indeed affect Seed of Corruption's damage. Sow the Seeds. It does not affect Malefic Rapture. So there's that to take into account too. But honestly, with how our toolkit is with Rapture and how it interacts with multiple dots, I just feel like there's too much overlap there, and so the Seeds is going to be overshadowed most of this expansion if it doesn't receive some kind of mechanical change as a whole. Okay, so moving on to Destruction here, the first thing I want to talk about here is Roaring Blaze, and the fact that Chaos Bolt is not affected by the damage amp. Now, I do know that it's more or less like a whitelisted versus blacklisted kind of spell here, and Chaos Bolt is technically chaos damage and not fire damage. However, chaos damage is basically every single kind of damage school that there is. The same can also be said though for Cataclysm and Shadow Burn, because they're Shadow Flame damage, which is shadow and fire damage. Now listen, I get that it's not pure fire damage, and I know that also taking into consideration Chaos Bolt's Mastery and crit scaling with a flat 30% damage amp might be a bit excessive at times, but I think for the overall, just thematically, and for the spec as a whole, I think that it's important that these spells are affected by Roaring Blaze. If it takes a bit of tuning for Roaring Blaze, a bit of a nerf and things like that, okay, it's fine. But at this point, as far as I can see, it's quite literally Chaos Bolt, Cataclysm, and Shadow Burn, which are unaffected by Roaring Blaze. Everything else pretty much is. There's a build that I put a video out on, I think a week and a half ago or so, playing Inferno, basically playing this build right here, and this build is actually dealing a bit more damage than casting Chaos Bolt. You cast Rain of Fire single target wise, and it gains a lot more value on 2 targets. So, and that's partially probably due to like it is due to tuning not being a thing. But regardless, Chaos Bolt does seem like it's a bit underpowered right now with the removal of Supremacy. And also going back to a 3-minute Infernal, depending on what legendary you're playing. So I think that as a whole, Roaring Blaze should indeed affect Chaos Bolt. If it takes a bit of tuning, that's okay, but even just thematically, it would make more sense. So now, we gave feedback on this change here last time as well. The reversion to Internal Combustion, which was buffed to 7 seconds, but then changed back to 5, is a good quality of life change. And I agree with, I 100%, like, it is. mainly due to how poor it feels with low levels of haste, and it's a problem due to how it scales damage-wise with higher levels of haste. That should be a lowercase w. Let's do that. Which you can see in BFA currently with expedient stacking, which makes internal combustion eradication extremely strong. Right now in BFA, it does make up about 11 to 13% of my damage breakdown on single target fights. We played with it on beta with the fire build, and the reason we're playing entropy here is it was like 3% of our damage. It is so incredibly poor with low levels of haste. The best change here, I think, if they want to buff internal combustion, is to make it scale more. Buff the spell power modifier, make it scale with intellect or spell power more, and that will put it in a better spot. The reduction of Soulfire CD from 1 minute to 45 seconds is a welcome change. I wish they would have kept the actual CD reduction that it has on live right now whenever you cast a Chaos Bolt, I believe is how it is. But regardless, the main issue that I have here with Soulfire is that they changed the spell that they made it go from giving you an instant cast Incinerate to an Immolate, which I think is a step in the wrong direction. Being able to cast a Soulfire in a Havoc window, which you could do, because it's important to keep in mind that Havoc's duration was increased by 2 seconds, like a month and a half ago. So, like, Havoc windows, yes, they feel slower on beta right now, but at the same time, they feel pretty decent because you can squeeze in a decent bit more spell cast. It feels pretty solid. Havocing a Soulfire was possible. It does give you 2 Soul Shards because there's 2 different iterations of it, and it does hit very hard. Now, it is a 3.8 second cast on a 45 second CD, but it's solid. Playing Roaring Blaze, like, the thing is, more often than not, you're going to have Immolate rolling on those targets already. So your sequencing is probably going to be Havoc, Conflag, applying Roaring Blaze to both, Soulfire. And then at that point, having an instant cast Incinerate made it so that you can go Incinerate, Conflag, and dump a few Chaos Bolts with all the shards you have. But applying an Immolate now just feels weird because you're going to have Immolate rolling in the first place, and it's going to probably just pandemic that Immolate to max value and then just lose extra seconds on it. Like, it feels really out of place. Plus, it's also important to mention here at the same time that Roaring Blaze's damage amp is checked upon spell resolution. You cannot precast a Soulfire and then Conflag when it's traveling through the air. It has to have the Roaring Blaze buff on the target before the spell that they're looking to amplify finishes the cast. So even as far as precasting on the boss goes, you can't precast a Soulfire and then Conflag on pull. Because you can, but you won't get the damage amp for it. Now that might apply Immolate, and that might be a much better, I guess, scenario for it to be there. But the fact of the matter is Destra is a big 2-target cleave spec, and Soulfire is a relevant spell to cleave in Havoc, depending on what's going on. But the shard generation you get is great. The damage it deals a lot of damage, especially with Roaring Blaze up. But the Immolate extension just doesn't feel good. The Incinerate clause should go back to it. At the same time, if you're playing Cataclysm and Soulfire, for whatever reason, you have this and baseline Immolate that all apply Immolate. You're going to want a Soulfire on CD. You're going to want a Cataclysm on CD, even single target wise. It's just a mess. Like, I think it really needs to go back to having an instant cast Incinerate clause instead. The Immolate change was, I think, not a good one. So hopefully it goes back to that. I did also mention here that allowing Soulfire to be affected by backdraft would further increase the likeliness of being selected in a variety of settings. I think it'd just be nice. It is a long cast time. So the sequencing of having your Immolates up, going Havoc, Conflag, Backdraft, and Roaring Blaze, and then Soulfire, I don't think would be too OP. I think it would be a good change overall for the spec. So that's what I like to see. Now, there's one thing that I want to bring attention to here as well. This is a bug on beta, and normally I don't talk about bugs in these videos, but this is a very, very relevant one. So, currently, this talent here, Reign of Chaos, is bugged. I can show you, basically, as long as we get procs here. I can show you 2 things. First of all, I'm going to drop my Infernal on this blue world marker, right? I'm going to put this turnip down. Let's put it right here. Now, number 1, there was a change made like 2 builds ago that had your Infernals off Reign of Chaos spawn wherever you dropped your initial Infernal. That meant that if your tank, you started fighting a pack here, for example, and the tank started kiting the pack, but you dropped, like, over here, where the turnip is, but you dropped your Infernal on blue, every other Infernal proc is going to spawn on blue, thus not bringing in the damage that Infernal Awakening has, or whatever. I think they removed that recently too, but, like, the travel time with your Infernal to the pack was a DPS loss. It was. So, Two things here. Number one, watch my Summon Infernal cooldown here. I'm going to show you the bug. So we're going to Infernal over here. Drops there, right? Okay, I also realized that it would be helpful to show you the Reign of Chaos bug to actually have the Reign of Chaos talent, but I have it now. Take two. So like I said, I'm going to drop my Infernal on the blue marker here. So we're going to look at both the Reign of Chaos bug as well as the changes to where the Infernals land. Infernal on blue. Watch my Infernal timer here, right? You see that little sliver there of CD reduction coming around where the color is? Watch this. So we're going to spam some Rain of Fires here, try and get some Infernals to proc. Watch the cooldown here. Ready? We have to get an Infernal to proc, but it hopefully will happen here. Or bad luck protection's a thing. Watch it. See it reset right there? Every Infernal you proc off of Reign of Chaos is resetting our main player round Infernal. But also, watch when these Infernals proc here. Well, I guess if you scroll back, that Infernal landed on the punching bag. It did not spawn back here where my initial Infernal landed. So two things have happened in this video, or this segment of the video. Basically, there's the Reign of Chaos bug. It's resetting our baseline player-bound summon Infernal cooldown. That needs to be changed, which also makes testing this legendary incredibly hard. Where is it at? This thing. It's a very strong effect. I think this very well might be Destra's best legendary, but you can't really test with it because you get most of your reduction value in your Reign of Chaos window if you're playing that. So it makes testing it a bit rough. Number two, the change they made 2 builds ago to the Infernals landing at your initial target from your player-bound Infernal does either seem to be reverted or bugged. I'm hoping it's been reverted because the travel time and on your Infernals and the DPS loss was a thing. They are now indeed dropping at the location of the target, wherever you place your Rain of Fire, or I guess Chaos Bolt technically. So it does work for Chaos Bolt. We tested it as well. So as far as Destra goes, though, those are the main changes I want to see here. I think for the most part, Destra feels pretty good. It feels slow, but it's important to keep in mind that every single spec on beta feels slow right now because we're on template characters running 4% haste. 6 because my gear is broken. Without gear being broken at 6. So things are going to feel slow. That's how it is every expansion as well. It'll get better. So let's move on to Demonology here because Demo has some changes we need. Number one, the main thing that I want to talk about here, the change to Axe Toss, making it an interrupt. The changes to Axe, I guess the change to Axe Toss is just not applicable to settings where we need an interrupt. It's not. Basically, the fact that it only interrupts on mobs that cannot be stunned still puts Demonology Warlocks at a massive disadvantage in Mythic Plus when it comes to trash packs. I've used this example a million times, but it's still true. This is like worded terribly. Jeez. It's still very true. Certain packs, like Atal'Dazar Screamers, will recast their ability if stunned in the middle of the cast, which I think it's their terrifying screech. You cannot use Axe Toss as an interrupt there because it doesn't work. You have to actually use an interrupt ability. A simple solution to this is quite literally make Axe Toss interrupt before it stuns. If the mob is casting a spell, it's interruptible, it interrupts. That's it. It interrupts. Done. If the mob is either not casting a spell or is casting one that's uninterruptible, it then stuns. Toxic Blades. Stuns. Perfect. There you go. Realistically, like, I don't like having Axe Toss as our interrupt because we sort of lose that single target stun utility that Demo has because Destruction and AF don't have those. We have like Shadow Fury, but that's a spec-wide ability. So I don't like it being tied to Axe Toss in the first place, but if this is the only version we're going to get, okay, I'll take it. So, however, like, I talk about this here a bit, and I talked about it a bit in the last document. I feel like the best solution is to simply give Demonology the Callfell Hunter PvP ability, which both lets Axe Toss remain a single target stun and solves the interrupt issue without a convoluted workaround like Axe Toss has. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. Let me change specs here briefly too. Callfell Hunter is a PvP talent, which quite literally lets you do exactly what you want. Invoke the power of Fell Hunter from the Nether to instantly spell lock the enemy target. Callfell Hunter cannot be used if your current pet is a Fell Hunter. Well, the cool thing is that we use the Fell Guard, and we have to because Demonic Strength and Soul Strike pigeonholes into that setting. It casts spell lock. So that's it. It doesn't even have to deal damage. It's fine. Just quite literally giving us this ability baseline. All you have to do is go here, move it from this section of our spellbook to this one. Bam, we're done. Done. Problem solved. That's it. That's all we need. That's it. If in the end they don't like doing this, or they don't think it's like relevant, or want to keep it as X cost, that's okay too. But I think this solves the issue a bit better. We did make a comparison to BM Hunter's Animal Companion, giving us 2 pets. That does require a bit more of like a spec overhaul. Not an overhaul, but a lot of changes tuning-wise. It would allow us to like twist out pets like our Imp, or our Fell Hunter, or our Voidwalker for taunts, or purges, or interrupts, which gives us more utility and fits the Master Summoner feel that Demonology has, but I think that's probably the least likely, even though I would probably like that the most. I think the Callfell Hunter ability is just the most relevant, best way to fix the interrupt issue Demonology has. At this point, we will still not be... Lacking an interrupt Mythic Plus is like trying to drive a car with no wheels. It doesn't work. Like, trash is a massive part of Mythic Plus. And I know that it works on bosses, and that's helpful, because it will work on... I mean, there are bosses you want to interrupt, but trash is the majority of Mythic Plus. The bosses might be more impactful on things, depending on Tyrannical and Fortified, but it is the majority of Mythic Plus. It's quite literally trying to drive a car without wheels. It doesn't work. It doesn't work, you know? So, and we've seen it over the course of most of BFA. Demonology's damage is very strong. Outside of like Fire Mage and BM Hunter, it's probably the strongest spec DPS-wise in Mythic Plus. And honestly, it has the highest burst potential of any class in the game. It will decimate a Fire Mage. If you LOS your imps properly on a massive pull with Worldbane, it will beat any class in this game damage-wise with burst. It will. But those are really niche scenarios, and not having interrupt really hurts. So, we mentioned this a bit before too, but it's important to rehash here. Grimoire Felguard was a 1.5 minute CD in BFA beta, was changed a few days before BFA went live to a 2 minute CD. I think it's very important that this is reverted to a 1.5 minute CD, because our Tyrant is now a 1.5 minute CD as well. We're not playing VOP, and that's excluding the Wilfred's Legendary, which we'll get to in a minute here. But with the changes to Demonic Consumption, not having to LOS imps anymore and having it based off of your pet's active health, having your Grimoire Felguard for every Tyrant is impactful. Felguard is it has more health. It's got a lot of health. It's really big, and it feels really bad waiting an extra half a minute, which is a third of this CD's whole like CD, for your Felguard. I hate using the word clunky, because clunky doesn't really describe things very well when you're not looking at somebody playing it in game. It feels unrewarding and lackluster is the words that I want to sort of use here. I hate holding my main CD, which is my final talent here, from my talent in the previous row. It's also very impactful. It sort of seems almost like how Dark Soul and Dark Lair are for Affliction, because when we got Dark Caller to solve that for Affliction in this talent slot, and we also have Wilfred's to solve that issue for Destruction with your Infernal and Dark Soul. If you're even playing Dark Soul anymore, which you might not be, because Supremacy is gone, but regardless, it needs to go to a 1.5 minute CD, I really feel. Having them desynced is just, it makes gameplay feel very unrewarding, subpar, just lackluster. You probably do need to nerf Felguard's damage a bit, but please don't nerf the duration, if possible. If you do, don't make it a long one, because you want to try and min-max value out of your Felguard into Vile Fiend, into Dogs, for Demonic Consumption, health, leeching. So, one more important thing here about Grimoire Felguard, too, is that in raid testing this week, which, by the way, if you guys didn't see that, they're all on my channel as well, but Grimoire Felguard also needs to reset on boss pulls, wipes, and resets. It felt terrible going into bosses playing Demonology and not having my Grimoire Felguard, which is basically like our Dark Soul kind of CD, to go with my Demonic Consumption based Tyrant. It felt really bad. I don't want to wait 45 seconds or have the raid wait 45 seconds for my CD. But if Demonology is indeed the best spec for certain fights, that will happen. It just feels bad. Most abilities do reset on wipes. I don't really see it as being like abusable in any way, really. Yeah, like with boss reset time, with boss respawns and everything, I don't see it being an issue. So it just needs to be changed to reset on pull. I mean, hopefully it's a 1.5 minute CD that resets on pull, but regardless, whether it's 1.5 or 2, that needs to be changed, because it just feels pretty bad. I think it's probably an oversight. So, further elaborating on rotational fluidity, I feel that Summon Demonic Tyrant is best suited to be an instant cast spell rather than a 2-second cast. It allows more pets to be summoned before previous ones expire, which plays well with Demonic Consumption, while also giving this spec a bit more mobility. Summon Vile Fiend is also a 2-second cast, which can become instant, I feel, without any real negative effect. Now, if given the option of one of these 2 spells being instant cast, it needs to be our Tyrant. There are a lot of times where I'm trying to set up a Demonic Tyrant with Consumption, in rating, Mythic Plus, whatever, and I get a mechanic on me that's not guaranteed. It's like RNG. And having to shift with your Demonic Tyrant out, trying to set it up, like casting the actual like Demonic Tyrant spell, feels bad. It feels really bad on live right now because of how quickly your imps cast and how much value you lose energy-wise. It's a bit different in Shadowlands because of consumption being health-based, but still, normally you're right up against the cusp of your pets expiring because you want to get as many pets out as possible. You want to have your Vile Fiend, your Grimoire Felguard, your 2 Dreadstalkers, and you want to have your 3 imps out as well. Or, sorry, more. Like, as many 3 imp waves as possible, and then go Tyrant at, like, 1 second remaining on your dogs because, well, you know, you want to get max value. So having the shift there, having that 2-second cast being factored in is frustrating. I really hope that was the number one thing I want to see go instant cast over like Vile Fiend or even other abilities. Tyrant being instant cast would do a lot for the spec. So, okay, one thing I want to point out here too is that before we get to the big part here, Summon Vile Fiend is currently not being extended by our Demonic Tyrant on beta. I can show you right now. They use a totem tracking system right here for pets. It shows duration here. Here's the Vile Fiend. He's a good boy. Watch duration here. No extension from Tyrant. It's a simple bug, but it needs to be fixed. So I wanted to bring attention to that. It hasn't been a thing until recently. Like, I think this build. So that's relevant. Let's move on here. Okay. We're going to come back to this. But I want to talk about this next. The Wilfred Sigil of Superior Summoning Legendary effect is a good bit undertuned CD reduction-wise for Demonology. The current CD reduction is 0.3 seconds per soul shard spent, called Dreadstalkers, Hand of Gul'dan. Those things spend soul shards. The issue is that we went through a full rotation with Demonology after casting our Tyrant, and it reduced the CD from a minute 30 to a minute 19 seconds. It doesn't feel very impactful. Now, Demonic Calling sort of is anti-synergistic with this legendary, making your dogs cost 0 soul shards, but even if they cost 1, it's not super impactful. You're probably only casting 4 or 5 dog sets per Tyrant, so it would equate to, what, 1.5 second reduction. I think it's pretty safe to say that this reduction can probably be buffed to 0.5 seconds or so per soul shard spent, which would equate to about a 110 Tyrant instead of 119, 118 or so. It is important to keep in mind that with haste and higher levels of haste, this will become more relevant because you're casting Shadow Bolts faster, hands faster, everything else is faster, so the CD reduction will get lower, similar to how VOP was on live when you gained more neck levels and things. So I think it's okay. It's important to keep tabs on, but early on, this definitely needs to be lower. Like, it could be even lower than this, honestly, with or higher than this, like 0.6 seconds, and it would be fine. So the next thing here, if Nether Portal is to remain a talent in Shadowlands, it needs to be changed to spawn demons based off the amount of soul shards spent, and not every time you spend soul shards. And what I mean here is, the way this is worded, it quite literally says every time you spend soul shards, you will summon a demon from the Nether. So what this promotes is essentially you get your portal out, your initial opener, and then you go Shadow Bolt to 1 shard, Hand of Gul'dan to 0. Shadow Bolt to 1, hand to 0. Shadow Bolt to 1, hand to 0, and then Tyrant, hand. That kind of gameplay is not what Demonology wants to do, because it is essentially a DPS loss to go Shadow Bolt, hand. However, Portal goes against that. It doesn't promote good rotational gameplay. And a very simple change to this is just making it based off the amount of soul shards you spend. Because essentially you'll be casting your 3-shard Hand of Gul'dans, and you'll summon 3 demons from the Nether Portal, versus, you know, going shard, hand, or Shadow Bolt, hand, which will also give you 3 after 3 hand casts. You know what I'm saying? It's just sort of convoluted. It would be really nice to tighten stability up and just make it, you summon X demons, spending X shards. There's no real weird interaction there. You can't dump shards faster because you're casting the same amount of Shadow Bolts technically in one hand. So I think that would be a great quality of life change as well. So now I want to talk about one more thing here, and that is Demonic Tyrant despawning and pet totem tracking, which is an issue on beta. Okay, so the issue of our Demonic Tyrant despawning when we summon more than 4 pets that are tracked using the totem tracking system in-game has returned in the most recent beta build. Summoning a second set of called Dreadstalkers while our previous set is still active, due to like the Tyrant extending the first set, causes our pets to despawn. At times, it despawns one Dreadstalker and our Tyrant. I've seen it just despawn the Tyrant. I've seen it despawn Felguards. So here's what I'm getting at. It's sort of hard to explain, but pets as a whole, when it comes to Demonology, are tracked using a totem style system. If you look at my nameplate here, watch me summon these Dreadstalkers. You'll see 2 dogs here. This is what they use to track this, and this caps out at four totems, which mean like 4 little circles here. Basically, 2 Dreadstalkers, a Grimoire Felguard, and a Vile Fiend will make this cap out at 4. However, when you set up your Tyrant also counts as a totem. And with your dogs being extended duration-wise, what happens a good bit of the time, I'm not going to pull my actual baseline pet out here either to make it even easier for you guys to see. What happens a good bit of the time is that due to this system tracking pets in a weird way, summoning more pets forces other pets out, and they just despawn. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to try and like recreate a scenario where I can despawn my Tyrant and everything else. Now, it's hard to do here because Summon Vile Fiend is also bugged and not being extended by our Tyrant in the first place. So what I'm going to do here is show you this. Here's my stopwatch. Now, Tyrant, you can see here, lasts about 15 seconds, give or take. But what I'm going to show you is... You'll see. So we're going to cast our dogs here, right? Called Dreadstalkers, we're going to build the 5 shards. Watch how we're tracking them here. My Tyrant's probably going to spawn over here. So we're going to go Tyrant about now to extend dogs, right? Dogs are extended. There we go. We're going to wait a few seconds here, okay? So we're going to have dogs off CD before these expire. We're going to go Grimoire Felguard, Vile Fiend, dogs. Watch. Tyrant's gone, and my other dog died. But they're still extended, right? Nope, because they got pushed out using the totem tracking system here. My dog died, and my Tyrant expired. Now, the one dog dying, it sucks. I love dogs. But realistically, it's unfortunate. It's a damage loss, and it shouldn't be that way. The big thing, though, is that demonic consumption is a huge part of our damage breakdown. Like, this wasn't even a buff Tyrant. This was a very subpar Tyrant, and it was still our #1 damaging spell. It's normally much higher than this. So this needs to be fixed. Now, previously, I believe they had fixed the Tyrant despawning bug, but I think in an attempt to fix Grimoire Felguard not despawning, the Tyrant is broken again, and the Vile Fiend is bugged in the first place. I don't know how to fix this because I'm not like, I don't know how like pet tracking really works outside the totem system at Blizzard, but it needs to be addressed before this goes live. This is not like a minor thing. This is like Demonology does not work. It is a broken spec. It is not functioning. This is currently an issue on live as well. However, the big thing is that we don't play Grimoire Felguard and we don't play Vile Fiend on live because demonic consumption energy or value is based off of your imp's remaining energy. Imps expend their energy. I don't know if you can see it here, but let me summon some. Imps expend. You can't see it here, but imps expend their energy based off firebolt casts. So everything on live is all about just max amount of imps, max amount of energy, you go. You don't care if you get dog extension with your Tyrant. I haven't even looked at that in a long time. All you care about is imps. In Shadowlands, that's different because it's based off of pet health. This changed. So you're pulling out your Vile Fiend, you're pulling out your Felguard, your dogs, and your dogs are being extended into your next set of dogs. So this has been an issue on live, and it is an issue. We have Tyrants despawning on live because if you follow this sequencing, normally it doesn't happen, but I mean, if you're trying to make it proc on live or despawn on live, it'll happen. But with the toolkit changing this much in Shadowlands, this definitely needs to be addressed. Unfortunately, I don't know how to really do it because I don't know how it operates completely. It appears some spells are whitelisted and blacklisted, like Grimoire Felguard and Tyrant, but at this point, I don't know. It's sort of a toss-up. But it's important to bring attention to this because it is essentially making Demonology broken in a bad way. Thanks for watching, though, boys. I know this video might have been a little longer, a little, I guess, ramblier than the ones I put out recently with raid testing and stuff, but I do enjoy updating this feedback document whenever I can, and it's important to draw attention to these issues and abilities that might be tuned a bit differently or could be changed in beta testing at this point. So, thanks for sticking around. Let me know what you guys think of the changes, suggestions, everything in the comment section below. I definitely have taken some of y'all's feedback into account. Honestly, a good portion of it into account for these changes. And there have been some direct changes made that coincide with feedback we've given. Now, that's probably not based off just the feedback I've given, but people in general. However, it does really appear like Blizzard is listening to a lot of feedback. So, as a whole, I do feel that Warlock is in a good spot right now in Shadowlands, toolkit-wise. Destruction and Affliction and Raid are looking good. I think AF's damage might be a bit undertuned and lackluster. Undertuned in Mythic Plus. And Demonology is good single target-wise and good in Mythic Plus. But the important thing to keep in mind now, looking at this video and just testing in general for raid testing, is that damage has not even been tuned yet. Classes that have not been tuned, it's more important to look at actual toolkits, how they feel, rotationally, everything else, and go from there. Tuning will come, but it's important to lock in on how the class actually feels, plays, performs, before we get to there. So, any questions, also feel free to drop them in the comment section below. I'll be sure to get back to you. Once again, weak awards and add-ons are working on beta at this point, so if you want any of mine, feel free to swing by stream anytime. I'll put a link down below, and if you have any questions, you can ask them there as well, and I'm more than happy to help. Thanks for watching again, boys. If you enjoyed the video, want to see more, feel free to smash the subscribe button below, and I will see you guys again soon. Peace!